there's a new Arcarnist class coming out with the Necrom update for the Elder Scrolls Online, and I wanted to give you and everybody else a way that you can play it that's relatively easy and does a decent amount of damage. Hello, it's Icy. Yes, I am back. With this time, maybe I don't know if this is the first build video I've ever done, but it could be. It could be. So, what I wanted to do with the Arcanist was work out a build that was simple to get the gear for, simple-ish, that was easy to play, that was a one-bar build, and that used Oakensoul, and also was a heavy attack build. All of those things combined together. Do I play that kind of build already? Yes, I do. I play a heavy attack Oakensoul build sorcerer, and I find it very straightforward to play. It's good for difficult content. It's good for easy content, and I wanted to see if I could develop something along those lines for an Arcanist as well. And I've come up with something. Now, this works great. It does actually work pretty well. So, to give you an idea of where I would put this in the amount of DPS slash things. All normal content, fine. All normal dungeons, fine. All vet dungeons, maybe not the very, you know, it depends on how well you play and whether you follow the mechanics. Probably you could do all, I think you could easily pug all non-DLC vet dungeons and probably do all of the vet dungeons, the vet DLC dungeons as well with a group that you knew the other people in. You can definitely do vMA, because I have done it on this character. I haven't tried Vatashran yet, but I think I could do Vatashran as well, probably with a lot more swearing, so you know. You could definitely do all normal trials, and you could do all of the kind of the earlier veteran trials. You could probably do all just trials. I don't think, definitely this is not a, it might depend on the group, so it's not going to pull a huge amount of DPS, but it will nonetheless be quite robust to play. So probably endgame guilds who are looking for good DPS in their endgame veteran trials, this is probably not the build for that. But, you know, I think it's going to cover a whole lot of stuff. So, as I mentioned, this is leaderboard. Well, you know, it's vMA qualified. So there's the run from this week. So each week of the PTS, I've been running a vMA run, and slowly getting better. There's still too many deaths to have a really high score, because I am still working out how to play it. But yes, all of these runs are in here. So let me take you through what I've got on the build, and also how to play it. If you're already playing a heavy attack build, this will feel very comfortable, which is what I was after. If you're not already playing a heavy attack build, but you haven't heard about it or you're wondering about it, try this one as well, especially if you're not quite sure of the Arcanist class. It's very resource hungry, which is why I like the Arcanist build, because one of the things I like ESO combat, but one thing I don't like is struggling for magicka to cast a spell or stamina to dodge roll. And the heavy attack builds take care of that, and it works just as well for the Arcanist, and I love it. So let's start with gear. So I'm wearing two main sets here, and they complement what's going on with the class. So one set is the deadly set. It's deadly. This is a set that you can purchase for either alliance points from the merchant in Bruma, in the north of Cyrodiil, or you can purchase it from guild stores from people selling their bits of deadly armor. one thing to keep in mind, the PvP event is starting today-ish, from when this video goes up. There'll be a second one a little later in the year, so you might consider using your alliance points to purchase some of the deadly set. So it gives you weapon and spell damage, crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and then it increases the damage of your damage over time and your channel's abilities by 15%. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is the Sargent's mail set. So this is the specific heavy attack set, and this one comes from Wayrest sewers. So it's just one of the early dungeons. Wayrest sewers 1 is fairly straightforward. Wayrest sewers 2 is still fine. People farm this dungeon all of the time, and it regularly comes up on pledges, so it should be relatively easy to fill in this set and get it. You are specifically wanting a weapon, so either a two-handed weapon. Usually I run this with a lightning staff, but if you wanted to do this with as a stamina version with daggers or something, that would work fine. Preferably lightning staff, in preferably precise, take what you can get. You want a necklace and a ring. You will need to transmute these, so you need to unlock these and then maybe transmute them. You could wear them as they are, but they'll give you a health enchant, which it won't help you for ultimate DPS. If you're working up to it, it'll be fine. And one either chest or leg piece. And the reason you want chest, you can take anything, but the reason you want chest or legs is because you will get additional armor, and it's already a heavy piece, so it's going to buff the amount of armor you had. So you may as well pick chest or legs and get more bang for your buck. Then the last piece of the puzzle is the Oakensoul ring. So the Oakensoul ring is a mythic available with the High Isle chapter. When Necrom becomes the main, the new chapter, High Isle will actually devolve to being counted as a DLC, and that means if you don't already have it, it'll become unlocked if you have ESO+. So if you don't have access to this now, you could be able to soon farm for it and unlock this one. So it's a 5-piece, 5-part antiquity. So you will need to do a bit of farming to unlock it, but all of the farming for this is all like it's overland or it's delves or it's all accessible content. It's not like locked behind a trial or like an end game dungeon. All of this should be fairly straightforward to get. I would recommend the ESO forums if you need to know more about where to farm for the Oakensoul ring. So they're the pieces that you need. So specifically the Sargent set, this is where you're getting your heavy attack damage from. When you deal damage with a heavy attack, you gain a stack of Sargent's Focus for 5 seconds, increases the damage of your heavy attacks by 645 per stack, and it can occur once every second and stacks up to 4 times. So if you keep up a continuous heavy attack, you will keep up that stack of Sargent's Mail, and it will do a lot of damage. Now, the deadly set. The reason why we have this is for one of the skills that we use. So let's take a look at those now. Alright, so what this character is using is Wall of Storms. So that's the lightning, or the Destro staff AoE, and it will also does the off balance, and it's dropping the actual shock damage as well. Then we're using the Cephaliarch's Flail, which I shall from now on simply call Tentacles because that's easier. Now, this has just been changed with the week 4 patch notes to give you a heal on hit, and that is awesome. So that's actually fantastic, and I've managed to pull out like a full heal and add this one in instead. Now, it's also an execute, and it also uses stamina rather than magicka, so do keep that in mind. But it's also adding the, you deal 5% more damage to creatures drenched in the ink, and the ink is what's dropped on them as you use this skill. Then we have the Tidal Chakrams. So this is your shield, and it's a shield, but it's also a heal as well. So it's a bit of a heal, a bit of a dot heal on the end. The other thing is it also, depending on which morph you use, it can generate crux, the little spinny bits, or use it. Now this one is really important. This is the Recuperative Treatises. So this one is you slot it on the bar, it gives you either bar. If you're running a 2-bar build, this works as well. You get the Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, doing extra damage, and it will give you a small magicka restore as well. It does do some damage, an insignificant amount. You have it on the bar because it looks cool, and it gives you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. So, and the last one is the Pragmatic Fake Cover, and this is where the Deadly set comes in. So this is a beam, so it's a channel, and it channels for however long, up to 4 seconds, 4.5 seconds, but you can cancel it with a right-click block bar swap. And it does a huge amount of damage. It really does an absolutely massive amount. And it will use up any crux that you've got generated. And then finally, we have the Tide King's Gaze, and this is your ulti. So I'm running, there are 2 versions. One is something similar to the Destro Staff ulti, where it's a single point, and it just does a lot of damage. Depends on how you play and in what situations you are. For vMA, for example, I think I very much prefer the Tide King's Gaze, which will it will follow the target. When the target dies, it will nominally move on to another target if there's something else very close by, and you know, within 2 meters it will target something else as well. Your experience, it may vary for you. It depends on what you do. If you're doing a lot of combat where you're running around, then you probably want the Tide King's Gaze. If you're doing a lot of dungeons where the boss is standing still, then the other one might work. And the other one does do more damage, but only if something's standing in it. So it does depend. Now, all of the passives are spent in all of the different places, and you can see I'm not really... That's it. That's all the bars. That's all we have. So, champion points. Now, it will depend on what level that you're at as to how many of these you can spend. Do note that this is a PTS top-level character, so it has all of the possible champion points, but I haven't spent them all. So what you absolutely need to spend are all of the passives under here. So if you're starting out a lot lower down, obviously you're going to need to pick and choose what you put things into. So start with your 1 level of your offensive penetration, and then work up to these ones. To be honest, the War Mage is more important probably than the Flawless Ritual, so maybe you take 1 level of Flawless Ritual, then spend everything into the War Mage and then work back. Eventually, like, these will be your last choice out of everything else when you get there. Ditto with these ones. You want your Quick Recovery, you want your Hardy, and you want your reduces the damage taken as well. So these are all extremely helpful. You see what your survivability is. You might choose to put things more into damage before you start putting them into defense, but go from there. So what we want is Wrathful Strikes, which is your weapon and spell damage, Fighting Finesse, which is your additional crit damage, and then we want 1 each of in here. Maybe you experiment and see which ones work best for you. Actually, Thermitage is probably better because your channel is a damage over time. But your other options might be Master at Arms or Deadly Aim. So Deadly Aim's probably going to stay there most of the time. That's your single damage attack. And your Beam, and your heavy attacks are single damage attacks, so that's really important. For the Red Tree, what we want is something slightly different to what most people maybe recommend. We do want Fortified for armor. We do want Boundless Vitality for the extra health. And then what we want is Bastion, which is the effectiveness of your damage shields. because really your damage shield is keeping you alive. The little amount of health of heals that you're getting from the Arcanist skills is not a lot, so you need for that shield to be super effective. Additionally, the Fate Carver also now gives you a shield as well as you're casting it, so the Bastion is actually extremely useful. And then the last one we have here, so this is an option here, so you can either go with Rejuvenation. If you're feeling squishy, you might want an additional layer of stamina and health and magicka regen, but the heavy attack build can mean that you just really don't need to worry about that. If you're in a group, you might consider going with Spirit Mastery, which allows you to res other players faster, and that can be very helpful. But the other one I'm trying here is Celerity, which is increases the movement speed. So while you're channeling, you are reduced to a walk. So having a little bit of extra movement speed is one of those things that actually kind of helps. So this last slot is a bit of a flex slot. You can sort of move that around and pick what you need for the certain situation or how you play. But I would very much suggest that you definitely want the Bastion. The reason we don't have the siphoning spells, which a lot of people, or Bloody Renewal, we don't have that slotted, because the heavy attack build means you get so much resources back anyway, it's kind of not needed. So now you might be going, okay, Izzy, hi, I'm a really beginner player and I'm not doing dungeons yet, and I'm definitely not going into PvP. What can I use instead of the sets that you've suggested? So so a couple of things. We have Soulshine. So if you don't yet have access to the Sargent set, I would recommend that you have a look at Soulshine. So activating an ability with a cast or a channel grants you additional weapon and spell damage. So that is also instead of deadly as well, for that matter. And the reason I recommend this is it's a heavy set, so you need to be using the jewelry and one piece of body armor, pretty much. So you might consider this. This is from Reaper's March, so that should be, and it's just overland, so it should be relatively easy to get hold of. As for a set to complement this, anything is fine. So a set that boosts class abilities is fine. Or for example a crafted set, so for perhaps something like Order's Wrath is also an option that you could try out instead. So I would suggest really what you want to do is you want to get the channel is awesome and fantastic, but probably more of your everyday damage is probably coming from the heavy attack. So do keep that in mind when you're kind of working out which sets you need when. So shall we do a quick pause so you can see how to actually play it. Now, the total damage coming out of this is not super fancy. We're not talking about a super hugely high parsing build here. We're talking about something that's practical, that you can use, that makes the Arcanist fun and enjoyable to play, and that you can do most of the content in ESO. It is not aimed at getting a high pars, and for that matter, I am not going to pars against the trial dummy, which will sort of, it won't artificially inflate the damage I'm doing, but it will show you the damage as if you were part of an organized and customized group. So I'm going to pars against the skeleton instead, so you can get a better idea of what's going on. So what we do first is we activate the buff, and man, that looks great. Then dot, and then we just pop some shields and things, and then we do maybe a heavy attack or so, and then we beam, holding down the button the whole time for the heavy attack, drop another heavy attack, and then we just repeat. Now, is this a great pars? This is a terrible, terrible pars. I'm not sure that this character really is even useful to pars on. Because you can see, this says that I'm doing if you've got very small eyes and you can read it. Oh, I haven't dropped the ulti, that will help. 17k, which is just like 17, 18k, and that looks absolutely terrible for a total amount of damage. Probably if I drop some more beams in here, it'll go up higher. But I mean, you can do vMA on it, so you know, it's kind of like, yes, it looks terrible. No, it's not great. Not a good pass. I can absolutely pass higher on a Sork. Even on the PTS, I can 100% pass higher. But you know, it's working. So in playing against nasty monsters, as opposed to a pars, which is an artificial situation for the best of times, the way it's working for me is I am, to some extent, which I've forgotten to cast the ulti again, using the beam as an ulti. So I would put down a dot, maybe throw a tentacle or something in there, get a bunch of heavy attacks, and then beam. So the beam is relatively expensive. The advantage of doing it that way is it means that you are not running out of magicka constantly. Okay, so with that, honestly, terrible pars where I mostly forgot to use the ultimate, that got me about 2k, oh sorry, 22k. So instead, we'll do it again. This time we'll try and remember to cast the ultimates. So another thing I'd say about the ultis and the beams, do try as much as you can to cast the ultimate first and then the beam, because when you're on the beam you can't do anything else, but when the ultimate is running, it is closer to, I mean, it really is closer to a Destro ulti, or even a Sork's Atro. So it will kind of do its own thing, and it leaves your, it has the advantage of leaving you to then cast other skills, to run other things, to try other different sorts of pieces, different bits and pieces, so the other thing to keep in mind is your beams will do more damage depending on how many crux you've got running around. So you can see I've got 3 there, I think. So the beam will get boosted if you have more crux. So the weapon skill means that other things you cast will generate crux. So the one thing to keep in mind though as well, so for example that shield just then spent all my crux. So one thing to keep in mind is some morphs of the skills will spend crux and some of them will generate it. So do keep that in mind as you're kind of building up your own Arcarnist variation. You might think about how you do it. So one other thing that's happening here, which is not how people normally pars, is I'm also casting skills like this shield, which are not required for the pars. And the reason I do that is because I want to get a feel for what it would be like out in the wild, basically. So, and he's dead. Okay, so slightly better, 23k. Oh, Munderstone. We didn't talk about that. So this character is right now, I think we're just running the Thief Munderstone, which is fine. That's fine. One thing you might try, I would recommend that you think about all the time, what should you should test the different things that you're trying with your build. So for example, if you were going, oh, maybe a different Munderstone would work, see if you can apply the other Munderstone and then do some tests. If you don't have access to a guild house or a house like this, if you're on PC and you have the hard drive space, you can always download the test server and you can set one of these up for free and do some experiments. If you're a member of a player guild, most player guilds will have access to some sort of house, they might have Munder Stones. They almost always have parsing dummies. So that's another thing you can use, another person's house, to try and work out and do some testing. If you don't have access to any of those things, the ultimate way of testing for damage is to literally look at the amount of health that a monster has, pick a big one, preferably one who doesn't have too many mechanics, who's not going to knock you over and muck up your parsing, and then just time how long it takes you to kill, and then divide by the time and work out what your damage per second is. Make a change, come back, fight them again, see if there's any sort of significant difference. But yeah, so that's my heavy attack single bar Arcarnist build. I like it. It feels really nice to play. It feels really nice to play out in the wild, moving around and slapping things with tentacles. I'm really looking forward to this going live and building a baby Arcanist and then just like power leveling them so I can run around and do cool stuff almost immediately. But are you looking forward to the Necrom chapter? Are you going to try out the Arcanist and see how they go? Is this a build that you think you might test? If it is, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, do keep in mind that this is a build not aimed at your super duper endgame players. This is a build aimed at players who just need somewhere to start, and like me, pretty much. But yeah, I really enjoy this build. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you test it out. Thank you very much for watching. You can also find me on twitch.tv/ICYIC, where I stream the Elder Scrolls Online, and you can watch me doing vMA. Once this all goes live, I will 100% be running vMA and eventually Valishran on the Arcanist, and then we see how we go. But thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.